Our program is called the Indigenous Language Instructors Program, based at Lakehead University in Thunder Bay, Ontario. Our program is to train fluent speakers in Algonquin language, 3 Algonquin languages, to teach the language in classrooms across Ontario.
It's individuals who are mature students, so adults, and it can be any age. We've had students everywhere from early 20s to 60s and 70s, and everything in between.
So the aim of the program is language revitalization and preservation through working with students to be able to teach those languages to other students across all levels, all classrooms from K to 12.
So the program has been around for a long time, since 1981, and the languages that our students speak and that they are learning to teach are Ojibwe, also called Anishinaabemowin, Cree, Ninimuin, and Delaware, which is called Haudenosaunee. These are all languages that are related. They're members of the Algonquin family. They're all spoken in Ontario. Anishinaabemowin or Ojibwe and Cree and Ninimuin are also spoken across the country, all the way to the Rocky Mountains, and in the case of Cree, all the way to the Atlantic coast. Anishinaabemowin is also spoken in the United States around the Great Lake area especially.
Yeah. Our program also mixes enhanced oral and written language skills with skills and curriculum for teacher education. So students are learning and developing their fluency, written and oral fluency in their language, as well as getting some of the key foundations for teaching. And our program is regulated by the Ontario College of Teachers. So there is a practicum component where students are in classrooms, and all of the rules and regulations and policies and procedures around teaching in Ontario are exactly the same for our students teaching language as they would be for other teachers. So having that practicum experience in the classroom is a key component to our program to ensure that our students are prepared to teach the languages once they leave.
Well, first and foremost, it's a very distinctive program because it's almost the only one in Canada which is a teacher education program that leads to certification but specializes in Indigenous languages. So that means that each of the students, as Brianna said, learns all of the fundamental components of education. They also learn about their language, how to write it, reading, and effective teaching methods. So the combination of that gives them really a package of skills that will enable them to teach in a classroom or in other settings where there's a real interest in language learning in communities.
I think when we explore Indigenous education, part of the assessment pieces to the program too also reflect Indigenous ways of knowing and learning, because our students practice teaching while they're at Lakehead here in July to children that we have that end up being a part of the program. There's that opportunity for them to speak the language and to have a teacher assess the evaluation of their teaching. So when you're looking at excellence in Indigenous education, it is reflective of some more deeper sort of theoretical foundations of Indigenous ed.
Well, first and foremost, it's the impact that our graduates have because they really go out and they teach in a wide variety of settings right across the province and indeed across the country, and that is one of the key measures that we use because it's visible. They're out in the community. They're teaching in school boards. They're contributors to maintaining and revitalizing their language. One of the important facets of the program, I think, is that we do have instructors who have taken the program who are themselves speakers of one of the 3 languages who have come back to be instructors. So there's a kind of cycle of ensuring credibility and authenticity in the program by really having those kind of instructors. And we do make a point of having as many instructors who are Indigenous people in the program as well as we can. So they teach a variety of courses, both the education part and the language structure part.
And I think another success of our program is that it gives the opportunity for people who are fluent language speakers to use what they know to find employment for sure. We do have students that come from Northern Fly and remote communities, and for them to be able to continue to grow and develop their language proficiency and teaching skills to be able to give back to their communities is also a huge success of the program. Knowing that they can contribute back is important. And I think just being a little bit reflective about their families, they are extremely gifted with their ability to keep language going for generations and generations. And once they see the opportunities that can come upon graduation with the language revitalization and preservation, that is just something a little bit more extra, that is probably more personal, that helps all of the students feel a sense of accomplishment when it comes to sort of who they are and what they know.
I think it's really any type of activity that benefits Indigenous people in learning, and this type of program does that. There are many different kinds of learning. It doesn't necessarily have to be in a classroom, in a formal setting, but all of these activities that benefit individuals so that they themselves can contribute in a variety of ways to their communities, to the broader society, those are all really key parts of Indigenous education.
I think for me, for Indigenous education is an opportunity for Indigenous students and sort of mainstream students to reconcile some of the history and perspectives and culture of Indigenous people back into education. Those things have been missing typically throughout history, I guess you could say, in Canada. And so Indigenous education allows for some space and place on the learning of Indigenous peoples of Canada to take place. Well, for me, I think a great vision would be to ensure that there are aspects of Indigenous knowledge spread throughout curriculum at all levels and grades and subject matter. Specifically for me as a Métis person, I would like to see sort of a Métissage approach to learning about all three Indigenous groups of people in Canada, but Métis people specifically, again, through all of those grades and through all of that content. I think that, of course, we have historically neglected or told perhaps an Indigenous story of Canada's history in our school system, and noting that Indigenous children are the only or the fastest growing population of children in Canada. It's important to provide space and place to see themselves reflected in their curriculum. Having a young daughter myself, she's only 10. I know when it comes to sense of identity and who you are and what you learn, it's important for her to be able to see herself in that content in school, which is a foundational place of where identity is formed as young children. So in the next 10 years, it would be really great to see that content in all subject matters across all grade levels.
I really see Indigenous education over the next 10 years and really beyond as something that impacts all of society, that leads to more and more significant opportunities for Indigenous people first and foremost, but allows for engagement of the whole of Canadian society with Indigenous people, with Indigenous history, culture, language, of course, and really everything that impacts everyday life.
I think whether it's language or culture or history or perspectives, definitely teacher education programs that reflect a solid foundation and knowledge base on Indigenous education and Indigenous peoples in Canada. Ensuring that those resources and materials are created by Indigenous people that can best speak to those perspectives and history and culture would be really important. and just allowing, I guess, government policies and processes to embrace Indigenous education, and knowing that those resources are vital to the learning of all children when it comes to diversity and equity in Canada and in education in general.
Thinking specifically about about language, I think there are many needs around documentation of different languages, preparation of good quality learning resources, and thinking about ways to effectively use digital technology to enhance language learning so that Indigenous language learners can really benefit and strengthen their languages.